All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for Fair Housing Foundation's 39th Annual Fair Housing Month. And this year's theme is Fair Housing, My Right. Now, all of us here at the Fair Housing Foundation, we welcome you as we have some fun activities planned with some great speakers, and I hope it's fun for you all. So let's take a look at what we have going on today. So for today's agenda, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the history of Fair Housing Foundation, having started in the city of Long Beach. We'll then move on to our keynote speaker, Michelle Uzeta, who actually has collaborated with Fair Housing Foundation on some past discrimination cases. So we'll be hearing more from her. We also have our guest speaker, Desiree Rew, who will be giving us a fresh perspective on self-care and what that means. We'll then be able to move on to our poster contest, in which youth in our community has submitted artwork based on this year's theme, and we'll be able to vote on our favorite pieces of artwork. Then we'll have our appreciation raffles, which all of you who are in attendance today have already been automatically entered for a chance to win one of our 12 raffle prizes. And then we'll be closing it out with some closing remarks by our executive director. Let me actually go ahead and introduce her now, our fearless leader and executive director, Stella Verdeja.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for joining us to celebrate fair housing. A little bit about myself. I have been with the foundation for 17 years or so. I am a HUD certified housing counselor and have been the lead on teams conducting over 2,500 sales and rental investigations. I'm extremely passionate about fair housing and helping the community thrive. I'm so fortunate to be able to be a part of the fair housing team and all the great work that we continue to achieve. So the Fair Housing Foundation provides an array of services to the community to promote equal housing choices for everyone. We currently service 26 cities in both LA and Orange County. We investigate discrimination complaints on behalf of tenants and those looking to rent. We open cases, investigate, resolve cases through conciliation, agency referrals, and litigation. I would like to mention we were just awarded a 3-year private enforcement initiative grant from HUD in collaboration with Homeownership OC, and we are excited to expand our discrimination department and increase our testing capabilities. We also provide tenant and landlord counseling sessions with our housing counselors providing information, guidance, and mediations. Our outreach department provides a multitude of outreach activities, including fair housing workshops, in-person and virtual presentations, hosting booths, community events, and distributing literature everywhere. And last but not least, our rental counseling program, the newest addition to the FHF services. It was created when we discovered a severe need to help renters take charge of their financial situation. Rental counseling provides them the support and guidance of a HUD certified counselor to reach their goals for financial stability. 2023 is an exciting time for us, and I am excited for the future. I'm so glad you have chose to join us today in support of fair housing rights. It is now my pleasure to present Ms. Cindy Guzman.
Hello, thank you, everyone. Once again, my name is Cindy Guzman. I am the Fair Housing Specialist. I've been with the agency for 22 years. I am a HUD certified counselor. I am also responsible for case management, investigation, analysis, and resolution of fair housing discrimination. My dream destination would be Paris, France, to visit the Eiffel Tower. April 11 marks the 55th anniversary of the Fair Housing Act. Before fair housing was federally protected, one of Los Angeles County group organized to successfully promote open housing policies and equality in the sale and rental of property, thus creating the Long Beach Fair Housing Foundation. Next, we're going to provide you with the history timeline. So in 1963, the California Fair Housing Act of 1963, better known as the Rumford Act, the goal of this law was to end unfair discrimination against people of color who were seeking housing in non-public and private housing. In 1964, the California Real Estate Association cited that the state should not deny a person to rent or sell property to any person as he chooses. Californians against Proposition 14 called the measure the Segregation Amendment, and in 1964 nullified the Fair Housing Act of 1963. Though many fair housing advocates were dismayed, one Los Angeles County group continued organizing, successfully promote open housing policies and equality in the sound rental property, just creating the Long Beach Fair Housing Foundation. The organization was run by a group of women that made it their mission to continue to promote equality and housing for all. In 1968, the U.S. Congress enacted the Fair Housing Act, better known as the Civil Rights Act of 1968, which specifically prohibited housing discrimination by race, color, creed, and national origin. And in 1974, the federal government expanded the Fair Housing Act to include protections for gender, and in 1988 to protect families with children and people with disabilities. FHF today now serves 26 different cities across Los Angeles and Orange County, with the cities of Hawthorne and Lancaster being the newest addition.
All right, thank you, Cindy, for that look into Fair Housing Foundation's rich history stemming from the city of Long Beach. Now, understanding what fair housing means can be a little confusing. So before we do go on, I wanted to show you all a quick clip of the breakdown of what federal protections and fair housing means. Now, do keep in mind that though this clip highlights the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which is the federal agency, FHF is actually your designated fair housing advocate at the local level. Now, I hope you do enjoy this short clip.
We all agree that everyone deserves a place to call home. It's against the law to be discriminated against because of your race or skin color, your disability, your religion, your sexual orientation or gender identity, whether you have children, or whether you recently immigrated. The Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination in housing because of race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, and disability. You have the power to file a complaint with HUD if you have experienced discrimination based on any of these protected classes. You deserve a place to call home. Fair housing, more than just words. Your home is your right. File a complaint. Call 1-800-669-9777, TTY 1-800-877-8339. Visit www.hud.gov.
Hello, my name is Martha Torres, Community Engagement Liaison with the Fair Housing Foundation. I oversee the Education and Outreach Department and assure that FHF has a strong presence in the community by bringing awareness about the services that we provide. I also help bridge the gap between FHF and the needs of our diverse communities by offering and developing educational workshops on rights and responsibilities and current issues impacting housing. Now, on a personal note, my dream vacation is to visit the Greek island of Santorini. I want to witness its beautiful sunsets and take walks on the volcanic beach. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Ms. Michelle Uzeta. Michelle Uzeta is an attorney who has specialized in civil rights laws since 1993, with a particular emphasis on disability rights and fair housing litigation. Michelle has previously served as the legal director of the Disability Rights Legal Center, the litigation director at the Southern California Housing Rights Center, and an managing attorney at Disability Rights California. Michelle's practice has focused on the litigation of high-impact lawsuits and representation of individuals facing discrimination under the Americans with Disabilities Act, Section 504, Fair Housing Amendments Act, and related state laws. She is a graduate of Stanford University and has earned her Juris Doctorate from King Hall School of Law at the University of California, Davis. Please help me welcome Michelle, who is going to talk to us about where we are 3 years after the Fair Employment and Housing Act amendments assistance animals, and Section 8 discrimination.
Hi, everyone. I'll just take a second to share my screen. Sorry, I'm not the most skilled at doing this.
If you go to the bottom of your screen, there's a little window pane next to the volume or the plus and minus. Keep going down, keep going down, keep going down. On that bar, keep going right. Go right, right, right. And then 2 more icons, that icon.
This one.
Yeah, that's gonna.
Ugh, sorry. I'd even practiced before I got here. So thank you. And I'll start my video as well. Thank you, everyone. I'm really happy to be here to celebrate Fair Housing Month with folks. I am currently the senior counsel at the Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund, which is a national law and policy center focusing on disability rights. We have a robust housing policy and litigation practice. We also provide support services to legal services providers in California and are always available to answer questions from fair housing centers as well. So I was asked to speak briefly about some of the recent changes to state housing law and regulations related to people with disabilities that have occurred over the last couple of years. So I'm going to talk briefly about Section 8 discrimination, some of the changes to state law regulations on reasonable modifications, and also assistance animals. First, with regard to Section 8 discrimination, and this is an area of the law that is unique to California. It's not a category of discrimination that's covered by the Federal Fair Housing Act. But Senate Bill 329, which was effective in January of 2020, amended the Fair Employment and Housing Act to make it clear that landlords with rental properties in California cannot discriminate based on a person's source of income. Now, the source of income prohibition was in the state law prior to 2020, but it did not include Section 8 benefits or other types of public assistance. So the amendments that went into effect in 2020 really clarified what source of income means and included things like Section 8. So now source of income is defined under the Fair Employment and Housing Act, or FEHA, as any lawful verifiable income paid directly to a tenant, their representative, or a housing owner on behalf of a tenant, including federal, state, or local public assistance and federal, state, or local housing subsidies. So this includes Section 8 voucher assistance and things like VASH assistance for Veterans Affairs, and really any kind of public program assistance that someone would get to benefit their housing. The importance of the amendments are really clear. Previously, landlords could decline to consider an applicant who received rental assistance. I'm sure for anyone doing housing work for any period of time, you know that prior to a couple of years ago, and even now, people still deny tenancy or applications to people on the basis that they receive Section 8. So these changes to the state law increase the number of housing opportunities for low-income people who are overwhelmingly Black, brown, and or disabled in California, promotes fair housing choice, reduces concentration of poverty, increases access to transportation, schools, and employment, increases the chance of voucher use, and prevents homelessness. There was an LA Times study from a couple of years ago that showed that about 43% of vouchers that were granted to people went unused because of just rampant discrimination. So prohibited activities include discrimination or harassment based on source of income, the refusal to rent to somebody or to renew an agreement for tenancy, If you interrupt or terminate a tenancy based on source of income, that's prohibited. Falsely representing that a rental unit is not available based on someone's Section 8 status or other source of income. Requiring any kind of conditions or restrictions in terms of tenancy. For example, I'll rent to you if you pay me $100 extra rent, that's illegal. It also applies to things like discriminatory land use practices. And it changes the way that you deal with requirements like you need to make 3 times the rent in order to qualify for this unit. The 3 times the rent should be based on the tenant's portion of the rent, not on the entire rent amount, if it is somebody that is receiving a subsidy. Another big prohibition is in discriminatory advertising. So it's unlawful to make, print, or publish, or cause to be made, printed, or published any notice, statement, or advertisement with respect to housing that indicates a discrimination based on source of income or an intent to discriminate based on source of income. So here's some examples of what that looks like. It can be very blatant, like an advertisement that says no Section 8 accepted, don't ask. It can be communications between a prospective tenant and a landlord where they say, well, you know, it's not about you, it's about the voucher. I don't want to go through the red tape. Sorry, I don't accept Section 8. And a couple of these advertisements are for a case that I have filed currently in the city of LA for discrimination. On a local level, many city and county ordinances also prohibit Section 8 discrimination. LA is here, Orange County is not. In the city of Los Angeles, the ordinance prohibits discrimination based on Section 8 and provides for damages in the amount of 3 times the rental amount. So if somebody is renting a unit for $1,000, discriminates against somebody based on Section 8 status, that person has the right to file a lawsuit and claim 3 times that rental amount, so $3,000 as a minimum penalty for violating the ordinance. And as I mentioned just a minute ago, along with Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles, my organization filed a lawsuit in the city of LA against 22 housing providers who had discriminated against one individual who for over a year had applied to probably 70 or so places to try to use his voucher. And this is someone who is a student who was part-time employed. He just had Section 8 to help bridge the gap so he could rent housing. So we filed suit against those 22 providers under the state law provision and under Los Angeles's ordinance, and that's ongoing. In terms of enforcement, Fair Employment and Housing Act allows for injunctive relief or policy changes, monetary damages, and attorney's fees and costs. I just discussed what some of the local ordinances provide for, and this includes LA and San Diego. 3 times your actual damages or 3 times the rent that was advertised. And then a person who's experienced discrimination also has the right to file a complaint with California's Civil Rights Department and or HUD. Moving on to reasonable modifications. There were a lot of changes to the regulations recently to kind of flesh out what people's rights are in terms of getting reasonable accommodations in their housing. So the general rule is that it's discriminatory housing practice for anyone to refuse to allow an individual with a disability the opportunity to make modifications to their housing, and that includes a unit and common areas. So any place that you're going to be occupying or utilizing. And in most instances, if you're talking about private housing, the cost of accommodation or modification will fall on the tenant. And we'll talk about some circumstances, limited circumstances where that cost can shift to the housing provider. Probably speaking to the choir, you all know this, but examples of reasonable modifications include things like installing a grab bar in a bathroom, installing ramps or widening doorways, lowering kitchen cabinets for people who use wheelchairs, altering walkways, installing blinking doorbells or emergency alarms, cutting curbs is another one that's often common. in terms of a history of FEHA's regulations, in 2020, the regulations were amended to include a bunch of provisions with regard to reasonable accommodations, which are changes in policies and procedures. But the regulations after 2020, they didn't address modifications at all. It was just a big hole in those regulations. But effective 2022, now the regulations do provide a lot of detail about the right to reasonable modification in housing. And they're very helpful and exceed in some ways what your rights are under the Fair Housing Act. So these are sections from Title II of the California Code of Regulations. I just wanted to provide this slide to let you know what the regulations cover. All of the regulations are available if you go to the Civil Rights Department's website, formerly the Department of Fair Employment and Housing. They have a pull-down menu. One of the pull-downs is to access the law and regulations. It's all accessible there. The folks that worked on the regulations, which included a lot of advocates, made sure that it includes examples to illustrate points, that is written kind of in a plain language way. So whether you're a tenant, a housing provider, an advocate, someone in government, you should be able to pull up these regulations and get a really good sense of what someone's rights are in these particular areas. So in order to have the right or qualify for a reasonable modification, the person making the request has to have a disability, and the requested modification must be related to the disability and necessary for the person to equally enjoy and use their housing. Again, we're talking about inside a dwelling and also common areas like the parking lot or the, in shared laundry room, something like that, pool area. The regulations do address what you need to do to make and process accommodations, somewhat consistent with federal requirements. They hold that you don't have to request a modification in a particular way or at a particular time. You have the right to ask for modifications throughout a tenancy or in the application process, even after you've been noticed for eviction, if it would somehow cure what you're being evicted for. You don't have to use special words, don't have to use special forms or procedures, although sometimes it is a good idea to use forms if a housing provider makes them available, because then you have it documented in your tenant file that you were approved to do whatever you need to do in terms of your modifications. Just in case there's turnover in management company or ownership, you have some record of having been granted that modification. Modifications must be promptly considered. What that means is really going to depend on a case-by-case basis, on the nature of the request, whether it's something that's going to require permits or extensive construction, or whether it's something that's fairly easy. To establish necessity for a requested modification, if the need is apparent, for example, you're a wheelchair user and you need a ramp to get through your front door, the housing provider really doesn't need to ask for additional information related to your disability or need because it's readily apparent. If the need is not apparent, the housing provider can only request enough information to show that you have a disability or the tenant has a disability, a description, reasonable description of the modification requested, and somehow draws that connection between the disability, the modification requested, and your ability to use or enjoy your housing. Housing providers are not permitted to ask for specific diagnoses, medical conditions, medical records. They can't quiz you on the severity of your condition or ask anything else that's really intrusive in that manner. Documentation of one's disability and the need for modification can come from their own credible statement. It can also come from documentation that you receive disability benefits, or from any reliable third party, including a healthcare provider or a therapist, social worker, a non-medical service provider, members of support groups, parents, children, or other relatives. Again, it's just a flexible area. It's what's reasonable. I guess the message is it doesn't have to be your treating physician. Many people don't even have a treating physician, but it doesn't have to be a treating physician or medical records to establish your disability or need for a modification. If a housing provider believes that a modification cannot be granted, the provider must engage in an interactive process to determine if an alternative is feasible. And on all of these slides, there's a citation at the bottom. So hopefully this can get to everybody who's participating today, so you have a record of that. The interactive process under state law is mandatory. This is different from federal law, where it's just encouraged. And this is a big deal, right? People fought for this to be included in the California regulations because otherwise, and folks who are doing testing and negotiations with housing providers know, housing provider can just turn someone down who's requesting a modification or an accommodation and then say, well, I didn't know. If you don't engage with the person who's requesting, that's going to be illegal under state law, not under federal law, although it's still considered under federal law if you're analyzing whether somebody has violated a tenant's rights. But it's very clear now under state law that if a housing provider believes they need more information or that a modification can't be granted, or they have some kind of other ideas about whether it's reasonable or necessary, that they must engage with the tenant or their representative. The purpose of the interactive process is to exchange information to identify, evaluate, and implement a modification that allows the person to use and enjoy their dwelling. And that's language taken directly from the regulations. So that's an important thing to remember. The interactive process is mandatory under state law. Reasonable modifications can be denied if the requester doesn't have a disability or can't demonstrate necessity, or if they refuse to pay for the modification. And that would be it, in situations where the housing provider can't be required to pay. Or when the requester refuses to provide a description of the project or plans, or to obtain necessary permits. So, if you're a tenant who's asking to cut curbs in a parking lot and install a ramp, but you're refusing to provide any kind of conceptual ideas or to guarantee that the work is going to be done by somebody who's qualified to do the work and will do it in a workmanlike manner, then that's going to be a problem and a basis for denial. And also in limited circumstances, if the requester is refusing to restore the property to the way it was before, that's another reason for denying modifications. That one only comes into play if you're making modifications in your unit. Modifications in common areas never have to be restored. But if you make a change to a unit, for example, lowering cabinets or lowering counters, the landlord may be able to require you to restore the property if it's reasonable to do so. And usually what they look at there is whether or not the next person to move in, are the changes that you made going to impact their use and enjoyment of the unit. Requests for reasonable modifications may also be denied if they constitute a fundamental alteration or an undue financial or administrative burden. These types of things come up pretty rarely. I don't even think I've ever seen that kind of a defense in a reasonable modification case, but it may come up if the housing provider is paying for the modification because it's subsidized or public housing, or for any other reason set out in the regulations, and it would be too costly to do. In those circumstances, you would consider factors like the cost of and financial resources of the housing provider, the benefits to the tenant, the availability of any alternatives, and whether the modification is needed due to a failure to comply with applicable codes at the time of construction. And we'll talk about that more in just a second on this side. So a housing provider can be required to pay for modifications under our state regulations in a couple of circumstances. The first is if it's public housing, government subsidized, or part of a public program like university housing or a public shelter system, veterans housing that receives federal subsidy. or if the modification is needed because of a failure to maintain the property, such as an elevator or that's out of order for a long period of time, or a handrail that comes off a ramp or a staircase and they don't repair it. If your need for modification is needed because of that failure to maintain, the housing provider needs to pay for that. And then third, if the modification is needed due to the failure of the housing provider to comply with building and accessibility codes at the time of construction, then again, you can go back and say, hey, you didn't do it right when you were supposed to, so you're on the hook for paying for it now. There's no kind of undue burden defense in that situation. And again, this is a little bit different than federal law. Under the Fair Housing Act, the act doesn't say it itself, but there's been cases that have interpreted the Federal Fair Housing Act that have said, if you're beyond 2 years from the date of construction, or the date, it's the date of certification of occupancy, then you don't have a private right of action to enforce these codes. You can't make the housing provider pay. So if somebody moved into housing that was built in 2000 and should have had, widened doorways and didn't, if somebody moved in 3 years after this, people moved in to that unit, the law would say, under the federal law, it's too late for you to sue. But now under state law, you're able to go back even further to say, if you didn't construct it correctly at the time that the building was constructed, the housing provider really should be responsible for correcting those things now. It shouldn't be on the tenant, regardless of whether it's private housing. There's other worthwhile parts of the regulations that are worth mentioning. I have all the citations here. There's a lot to read up on the requirements around restoration and whether a tenant can be required to restore premises, put money into an escrow account, things like that. There's also some provisions on competency of the work. Our state law is pretty consistent with federal law that it's not required that you get somebody with a special qualifications. You really just have to ensure that you have the right permits, that you have somebody who's competent to do the work in a workmanlike manner. Maintenance responsibility is another area. If a person has a modification done, it's not on the tenant to maintain that modification if it's in an area that is ordinarily maintained by the housing provider. So again, using the example of somebody who has installed a ramp leading from a parking area to their front door, even if they paid to install the ramp, let's assume it was private housing, since it's in a common area, the housing provider would be responsible for maintaining that ramp. And that may mean things like, sweeping leaves or removing snow, or ensuring that people aren't parking bicycles or otherwise obstructing that ramp. It's their responsibility since it's in a common area. The regulations also talk about how housing providers cannot place conditions on people who need modifications. For example, saying, well, we'll allow you to make the modification, but you have to purchase liability insurance. We want you to sign all these kinds of waivers. You have to be responsible if someone gets hurt. Those types of conditions cannot be required. And then there's provisions on alternative design or aesthetics. Sometimes housing providers will want to, tell a person with a disability, well, I know you're asking for this, but I'd rather you do this, or I want you to have it in this color or done in this kind of way. And sometimes they want it done in a way that's more expensive. If there's a difference in cost, the landlord will have to pay for it. But in general, people with disabilities, what they're asking for should be provided unless the housing provider can show that it would be unreasonable or that it's unnecessary. Because the basic idea is that people with disabilities know best what accommodation will work for them. And it's really not for the landlord to dictate what the person should or shouldn't have as their modification. I know we have a comment in the chat. Okay, so there seems to be, maybe I'm not clear on who pays for what. So if a landlord is in, or a tenant is living in private housing, fair market housing, and they need a modification, whether that modification is needed in the unit or in a common area, it would be the tenant's responsibility to pay for that modification. Seems highly unfair, but that's the way that the law is. The circumstances where the cost can be put on the housing provider are fairly limited. The first is if it's public housing. So if it's housing that's operated by a government or federally subsidized, university housing, things like that. So public housing, that's an exception. The other exception is if the need for modification came about because the housing provider failed to maintain the property. So you wouldn't, if I'll use this example, say that a housing provider, private housing provider has a pool that has a pool lift, and I move in and I utilize the pool lift because I use a wheelchair, and then the pool lift, the battery dies, and then it breaks down. And I go to the housing provider and I say, hey, I need the pool lift as a modification for my disability. The landlord can't say, well, you pay for a new pool lift because I'm a private housing provider and this is a reasonable modification. Because my need for the modification is coming about because of the housing provider's failure to maintain their accessibility features. So that's that. The cost would go on to the housing provider. And then the next reason is if the housing provider failed to comply with accessibility codes at the time that were applicable at the time that they constructed the housing. And if that caused my need for accommodation, that would be a problem. So again, as an example, housing that's built now has to have doorways of a certain width that accommodate a wheelchair. If I moved into a unit in a complex that was built last year, and the doorways were too small to accommodate my wheelchair, I could go to the housing provider and say, hey, I need a widened doorway. The housing provider cannot say, oh, reasonable modification, you have to pay for it, because the need for the modification has come about because of the housing provider's failure to comply with codes that were applicable at the time the housing was constructed. Let me get through the assistance animal slides, and then time permitting, I can get to the questions. It's hard to pull up the questions while I'm trying to go through. And then I'm hoping we can share my my PowerPoint with people, and it will have my email on there. And I encourage people to contact me. Part of my role in the community is to provide technical assistance and answer questions for people who have questions about disability issues. So you should not think twice about reaching out to me. All right, so moving on to assistance animals. The Fair Employment and Housing Act makes it unlawful for housing providers to refuse to make reasonable accommodations. That's been a rule that's in place for a really long time. A common request that housing providers receive is for the reasonable accommodation of allowing someone to reside with an assistance animal. And that is now clear in the state regulations. An assistance animal is a term that includes both service animals and support animals. Service animals are animals that work, provide assistance, or perform tasks for the benefit of an individual with a disability. And service animals also have additional rights under other access laws, like the right to go into to accompany their handler in a store or in a restaurant, that type of thing, under the ADA and other laws, state laws. Support animals are animals that provide emotional, cognitive, or similar support that alleviate one or more identified symptoms or effects of an individual's disability. Sometimes these are referred to as comfort animals or emotional support animals. They are animals that do not require specific training. They don't provide work or tasks. They just kind of do what they naturally do, which is provide comfort and emotional support. And they are also animals that do not enjoy the same access rights outside of the housing context as service animals do. So if you have a comfort animal or emotional support animal, you cannot bring it to a restaurant or to a store. That's not a legal right. Some stores and restaurants obviously do allow all sorts of animals, but if you're asserting a legal right, you don't have that legal right. Well, regardless of whether an animal is a service animal or a support animal, they're not considered pets when you're talking about the housing context. Special training is not required for assistance animals. However, there must be some kind of connection between the person's disability and the assistance the animal provides. There's no legal requirement that the animal be registered or certified. And businesses, these are particularly online businesses that claim to register or certify animals, are charging for a service that's not required and for a service that is not going to be recognized by the courts. If you get something online that says, hey, my animal is an emotional support dog, the courts are not buying that. In terms of the questions a housing provider can ask, if you have a service animal, the only permissible questions are you a person with a disability? And what is the disability related task the animal's been trained to perform? Housing providers can't ask potential tenants to have their dog demonstrate the task. That's ridiculous. And if the need for the animal is not obvious, you're not a person who's blind who's using a guide dog, then reliable disability related information can be requested. Processing requests for assistance animals, you really follow the general process that you would follow for a reasonable accommodation or modification. You're looking at whether the person has a disability, whether the request for the assistance animal is necessary and reasonable, whether there's a connection between the disability and what the animal is doing. And as I noted before, these kind of identification cards and certificates and vests that you can buy online are not, they just don't have any weight at all. And the interactive process applies here as well. Pet rules or restrictions. Very clear under the regulations, the following things. Housing providers cannot limit the breed or size of the dog used. People can have more than one assistance animal, but each animal must be individually determined to meet the requirements for an assistance animal. So someone might have like a little Chihuahua who is, that's an emotional support animal because they suffer from depression, while at the same time using a German Shepherd because they have a mobility impairment. Both animals would qualify and provide different tasks for the person, so the tenant should be allowed to have both animals. Pet rules do not apply to service animals or support animals. There can be no pet deposits. There can't be limitations on where you can go with your service animal or your assistance animal. The person with the disability is responsible for feeding and maintaining their animal, for providing veterinary care, controlling the animal on the premises. Housing providers can charge for damage that an assistance animal causes if it's their regular practice to charge tenants for damage, but only for something that goes above wear and tear. It's okay to have restrictions on waste disposal and animal behavior that may constitute a nuisance, but the conditions can't interfere with the normal performance of the animal's duties. So for example, a leash requirement that's going to interfere with somebody's dog performing their duty. It may be okay to occasionally take them off leash. I can't think of a circumstance where that might be the case, but that's an example. And then a no noise kind of requirement may interfere with a dog having to bark to alert a blind individual to danger or someone at the door. But that doesn't mean the dog gets to bark all day and all night, because that would go above and beyond what would be acceptable. California law permits housing providers to establish terms in a lease or rental agreement that reasonably regulate the presence of guide dogs. This comes up a lot. I know it's come up with some folks at the Fair Housing Foundation. My position is that lease terms or addendums can be discriminatory. They may be preempted by the Fair Housing Act, which prohibits accommodations from being conditioned on execution of additional documents. And oftentimes there are some sample or template addendums out there that have some terms that are really concerning. If any of you have questions about that type of issue, it's something that my organization is looking into now, along with some other organizations in Northern California. We're hoping to engage the Apartment Association to talk about some changes that we think need to be done. Reaching the end here, direct threat. An assistance animal does not have to be accommodated or allowed if it constitutes a direct threat to the health and safety of other people, or it would risk substantial physical harm or damage to the property. And that harm can't be mitigated or eliminated by the provision of another type of accommodation. And I have this little cute little dog here. I think it's a pit bull, but I don't know. I don't know dogs that well. But you can't, the direct threat determination requires an individualized assessment. You can't just assume that because of a certain breed of dog is going to be dangerous or anything like that. The assessment has to be based on objective evidence about the actual specific dog that you're talking about. And it has to be something that's reliable, credible, not mere speculation or fear. That's the end. I'm right on time, right? I'm 1 minute over. Thank you. I will stop sharing my screen, and if I'll be here lurking. So if you want to send me a message through the chat, I can answer questions then. Thank you again. I'm sorry I had to rush so much. I'd be happy to come back to do another training for folks.
Thank you, Michelle, for providing us with such valuable information. And we will most definitely share your slides with the attendees. Up next, we have Alicia Nguyen, our outreach coordinator.
Thank you very much, Martha. Again, my name is Alicia Nguyen. I joined Fair Housing Foundation in 2022 as outreach coordinator. I help with increased community awareness about Fair Housing Foundation and our services by hosting weekly workshops, attending community meetings and events. My dream destination is the city of Rome. It is now my pleasure to introduce our second guest speaker today, Desiree Rew. A graduate of Howard University, Desiree is currently a doctoral student at Tulane University School of Social Work. She is a person of many talents, a clinical consultant, a speaker, freelance food writer, a travel writer. Desiree, welcome, and thank you very much for being with us today.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is my absolute pleasure to be here with you. And I want to thank you in advance for a new title as the Self-Care Aficionado. I know I've called myself that. I've given myself that wonderful title, but I've never actually seen it written under my name during a presentation. So this is precedent. You all have set the bar for every other organization that I ever present to. I'm going to share my screen and then we're going to get started. Let's see. Okay, now, so we're going to talk about, and I love the way it was framed right from the beginning, a fresh perspective about self-care. Self-care is literally being thrown around, as I would say, slung around as this new, great, wonderful concept that has everything to do with luxury, pampering, and time, none of which we have capacity for. However, I'd like to talk about reclaiming your right to self-care. And when I say reclaiming means that it is something that already belonged to you and you're just going back to get it. Self-care is something that has always belonged to us. We give it away. And so hopefully by the end of our time today, you will reach back and pull your self-care back to you. As is stated in my bio, I am a social worker. I'm actually a licensed clinical social worker. I do have a master's degree in social work from Howard University, and I am currently a Tulane University doctoral social work student, which only means I love being a broke college kid, but more importantly, the impact in the field of social work is still very, very near and dear to me. And so I continue to learn how to impact the work that I do, which means impacting the people that I serve. I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland, mom to one son who's also a social worker. I've been a social worker for 31 years, advocating, fighting for, helping to move people along from their worst points to their better points. I am a survivor of burnout, vicarious trauma, and compassion fatigue. I've worked in the permanent supportive housing space. I understand the difficulties it is to ensure fair housing for all, particularly our vulnerable citizens. But I also like to call myself the dessert first self-care strategist, meaning that whenever I am put in to have the decision of what I'm going to reach for first, I'm always going to reach for the dessert, because the dessert to me is the best part of the meal. And it is the best part of the meal that I always want first for me. I always want to have the best part first. And so I encourage others to do the same. Throughout my tenure as a social worker, I have developed a framework, and I call it Self-Care-ish AF. Now, we know what AF means. That F rhymes with duck, but starts with an F. Yeah, that one. So Self-Care-ish AF. Usually when you see AF at the end of a sentence, it's highlighting the thing that comes before it, right? And so, for example, someone may say, oh my gosh, I'm hungry AF, right? Or I'm broke AF. It usually highlights the thing before it. So what Self-Care-ish AF highlights is one's declaration that their self-care is the most important thing to them. I am self-care-ish AF. There are 3 pillars to being that. In order for you to really be able to put yourself first, really truly be able to understand your position in the position of helping others, there are 3 things I believe you need to do. One is you have to redefine your self-care. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Why redefine it? Because for many of us, it's been defined by cultural, societal, and psychological things that have really created a barrier, preventing us from being able to proactively engage in self-care. Then we need to refocus it, because once we understand our barriers, then we understand how to utilize self-care better. We're used and we're conditioned to utilizing self-care for recovery at the end of a burnout, at the end of stress. But what this framework does is teaches you how to utilize self-care proactively, because guess what? You don't have to burn out first. You don't have to earn self-care. Self-care is your right and within your power. Actually, it is a superpower. And then lastly, we reimagine self-care. When we ask people to reimagine things, usually we're asking them to take what they already have and create something new. There are things you're already doing for yourself, but you don't call it self-care. So what we're going to do and what we talk about as a part of this framework is how to add more of you to your schedule, how to reimagine, how to move around some of the things you're already doing, but doing it on purpose and specifically calling it your self-care. Here's a quote from Maya Angelou, the poet, the author, the civil rights activist. You may not control what happens, the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. And I'd like to start with that quote, because oftentimes we feel that we have no control over the things. So we have no way to incorporate self-care. But in actuality, although you may not control the events that happen, you can decide not to be reduced by them. You can decide to incorporate your self-care anyway. When we talk about the barriers to self-care, there are 4 barriers that I've identified. that creates or makes it a little more difficult for us to actually incorporate the things that we know that we need, that our body tells us that we need, our mind tells us that we need it. The first thing is your core beliefs, what you learn about putting yourself first. Many of us never learned to put ourselves first. We have learned to create our life around our work. Why is that? Because for many people, work is the valued thing, right? That's why they call it work-life balance, when in actuality, it should be life-work balance. But many of us were raised to believe things like, work first. You should always be doing something. Who ever heard you can rest when you're dead? What do you mean you're tired? What have you done today? All you did was go to school. So we grow up believing and understanding that we put ourselves behind the work. We've oftentimes watched those that we've loved, our parents, our grandparents, work without any real thought or putting themselves second. And so we learn that putting ourselves last is actually what is supposed to happen. Work is first and you are last, when in actuality, it should be the other way around. So what you really believe about work, what you've been taught, what you've grown up to understand, what you've seen and witnessed, creates or created your core beliefs around putting yourself first. That becomes a barrier to your self-care, because self-care goes against the things that you were raised to understand about work and the relationship to self-care to work. Self-care being mislabeled. Defining your self-care by the routine or expectations of others. This is a great barrier to self-care. What do we mean when we say mislabeled? Well, sometimes we may look at someone else and what they are incorporating or saying that they like to do or defining as self-care, and they are totally against the things that we like to do. We don't like to do any of that. And so because we don't like to do what someone else is saying is self-care, then we think we don't do self-care well. So we think that we don't do self-care, or we do things that people expect us not to. For example, those who may want that few minutes alone in Target, maybe want to go and not take everybody with them, right? The expectation is that you be here for me. You be here for others. You be available when I need you. And so you believe that your self-care has to fall within those guidelines. How many of you have family members who don't understand your need for wanting to take off? Who may say, oh my gosh, you're taking off again? Wow, what kind of job do you have? So oftentimes the expectations of others create and make it a little difficult for us to actually incorporate self-care for ourselves. And also burnout blaming. Oftentimes we blame external things, the things that we really cannot control, but the things that do impact us, like our workload, like discrimination, like all of the things that we are fighting against, we say, that's why I'm burnt out. But in actuality, the definition of burnout, the official definition of burnout, is a result of chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. And so just like our self-care is not a one-size-fits-all, neither is the problem. However, instead of blaming all of the external things which do contribute to your stress, the focus should be on the solution, which is self-care and what you do for you. So these are things that make it difficult for us to really put self-care into place for ourselves, because if we blame the problem, then we also expect the problem to be the solution. And the problem will never be more of a solution to you than you will be to yourself. Then there is self-care shame. That is that feeling you get when you know you need to take off, but you just don't. It's that feeling of guilt that you take when you do take off. How many of you all have experienced that? How many of you all have way too many PTO hours that you're carrying over every year because you're not taking time off? Shame and belief go together. The shame typically comes because we feel like we're doing something wrong. Taking off for yourself, setting time aside for yourself, doing things for you, the focus being on you and not on the work or not on someone else, brings about feelings of shame because of what our values say. So oftentimes that self-care shame is something that we are always trying to avoid. When you're trying to avoid something, you avoid it. When your self-care has a place of shame within you, you tend to avoid it. And lastly, limiting beliefs. These are the thoughts that get in the way of us actually incorporating self-care. Thoughts like, self-care is a luxury. Self-care is not for me, it's for them. Self-care costs money. I don't have any money. Self-care requires so much time. I don't have any time. You see what I have to deal with, all these things, and I'm having to stay on abreast of to be able to advocate successfully for my clients? Who has time for self-care? These are all limiting beliefs, because the truth is that self-care is anything that gives you joy, satisfaction, and time. And when I say anything, I mean anything. If singing a song brings you joy, changes your mood, a song is self-care. Putting lemon in your water with fresh mint is self-care. Packing your favorite snacks is your self-care. Self-care is anything. Self-care is delegation, right? Letting go of the need or feeling like no one can do it but you. Allowing others the chance and the opportunity. Being honest with others is self-care. A lot of times we hear that we have to learn how to start saying no. I need to start saying no more. And I'd like to challenge you, instead of working on saying no to other people, work on saying yes to yourself. What difference would it make in your life if you started saying yes to the things you wanted to do? Not focusing on the problem of being asked or the problem of being expected to do something, but focusing on purely saying yes to yourself. Self-care is all of those things. Self-care is your favorite mug, it's your favorite perfume, cologne, it's your favorite color. It's your playlist that you play. It's the moment that you take when you're just being quiet. It's a nap. Oh my gosh, self-care is truly a nap. It gives you joy and it gives you satisfaction and it gives you time. It is self-care. So it's not just getting your nails done or getting a massage or even taking the day off. Self-care are they're big and they're small things that you can do to fill your cup. So when we talk about big things, right? I like to call them the major activities. And these are the things that do require time and money, excuse me, and planning. These are the things like your vacations. These are the things like big family gatherings. These are the things that, concerts that you're looking forward to going to, buying tickets. All those things would be considered major activities because they do require some semblance of planning. But we also know that these are the things that we tend to put aside quicker. We reschedule. We rethink. I don't have time to do that. I can't do that, right? The big major activities. But then there are minor activities. And the minor activities is really where the superpower lives. Because again, Self-care is your choice. No one is going to give you the time. No one is going to really be as concerned about your self-care more than you, right? So it's the minor activities that really help to be able to incorporate self-care in the times that you need it, which is literally every day. These are the small things, and I categorize them by their doing or being. And the only thing that they require is intention. They don't require money. They don't require planning. They require intention. Doing or being. Sometimes just being present can be your self-care. If being present for something brings you joy. Learning is self-care. Again, very small things. I've had people say, oh my gosh, I love to put stickers on my cup. Stickers on your cup is self-care. The plug-in in your office is self-care. The glittery pencils and journals that you spend time picking out because the colors mean something to you, because you've decided you have a theme for the year, that is your self-care. And those things can be implemented in very small ways. When we look at our cup, right, as you see here, the major activities absolutely can fill up our cup, absolutely. But if you look at the cup beside it, that cup is full as well, with major and minor activities. What are the things that you like to do? Unconventional, non-traditional, the things that when you tell people, oh my gosh, I love that, and they go, oh, really? Oh, okay, I would never do that. That's your self-care. Self-care is as individual to us as our fingerprints. And so we have to really start rejecting what self-care is, or allowing other people to define it for us. You have to define self-care for yourself. Why? Because it is for you. And who knows you best? You. Yes, work is stressful. Yes, we have a lot to do. Yes. Yes, all of that. However, it does not have to be an either-or situation. When things slow down, then I'll take care of me. When I reach this place, then I'll take care of me. When I hit the lottery, then I'll be able to take care of me. You can incorporate small things that mean so much to you, that change the entire trajectory of your day, and be in a stressful situation, and still haven't hit the lotto, and still haven't made it to that date that you have created in your head when you decided, when you said, when this happens, then I'll be able to focus on me. Because in actuality, until you focus on you, those things get further and further out of reach. So what I'm asking you to do when I ask you to refocus and reimagine your self-care, I'm not at all saying you need to take things off your schedule. I'm saying you need to put yourself onto it. You need to put yourself onto it, and you've got the power to do that. How do I know what my self-care is? I had someone to say, I don't think I've been doing self-care right. And when I hear things like that, it lets me know that they don't have a true understanding of what it is that they like, or how to utilize those things as self-care. We have been taught to put self-care on the end. We work and then we have a weekend. So we're conditioned to believe that self-care is something that happens after the fact. We haven't been taught to understand that self-care happens after the fact. Self-care can be utilized for preparation. Self-care can be utilized for sustaining, meaning It's not just the end. If you've ever said on a Wednesday, oh my God, I cannot wait until Friday, I'm over it. Oh my God, is it Friday yet? There is nowhere written that said you had to. You don't have to wait until Friday to infuse yourself with what you need. You literally can do it on Wednesday. You literally can do it on Thursday. You literally can do it on Friday. When you understand that it is also the small things that are self-care. So how do I know? How do you know if it's self-care for you, right? If it's your thing. I've created this acronym SMART, and we're familiar with SMART. We're making SMART goals for our clients. We make SMART performance goals, but the letters in this SMART mean a little something different. So the S stands for sustainable. Your self-care should be sustainable for you. It should be manageable, accommodating, relaxing, and thrilling. And if it is not SMART, it is not your self-care. I wouldn't add it to the list. So when we say sustainable, your activity should match your schedule as it evolves. You should be able to maintain the activity at whatever level rate you have going on right now. So meaning it's not sustainable for how your life used to look. It's not even supposed to look today what your life was last week. Sustainable meaning whatever activity you're putting in place, you can sustain it for the schedule that you have right now. Well, Desiree, my schedule looks different every day. So should your self-care. Because it shouldn't be one or two things. You should have a plethora of things. It should be manageable. It shouldn't be harder to do your self-care more than it is to live your life. It really shouldn't. You should be able to incorporate and infuse those things that make you feel good, that keep you clear and focused and balance you in a way that does not feel overwhelming. If it feels overwhelming to do it, it's probably not your self-care. We wouldn't put it in that bucket. It should be accommodating. And here is truly the secret sauce to the superpower. Your activity should be based on your needs and accommodating to you. Your love language. Do you know your love language? Your personality. Are you an introvert or extrovert or ambivert? Because listen, introverts, stop hanging out with the extroverts. You know you don't want to. Extroverts, stop asking the introverts to go out with you and telling them, you just need to get out. You need to be around more people. They don't want to. Find your tribe. Do the activities that are accommodating to you, to your strengths. If you don't know what your strengths are, take time to understand them. What is it that you're good at? Do you know your Clifton strengths? Have you taken a DISC assessment? These things are important because they're you. I have a learner strength, is one of my strengths, one of my Clifton strengths. It makes complete sense that I love to stay in school. I love to learn. I love to take a class. Taking a class is my self-care. Learning to do something new are the things that I do for me because I enjoy them. They're my self-care. Attending meetings like this is self-care to me. Maybe not to someone else, but it is to me. And then if it is to you, you do more of it. And it should generate the positive outcomes. So think about the things that you do or that you really like to do based on you, not based on the group or the things that are based on you. And those are the things you want to have as your self-care. Listen, at the end of the activity, you should really feel relaxed. It should just be relaxing to you, okay? Physically, emotionally, your whole mood should really change. I am a dessert first self-care strategist also because I love desserts. And let me tell you, a good donut will change my entire life. Small things, self-care. Thrilling. Lastly, it should be thrilling. It should make you smile to think about doing it. It should make you smile to want to do it. That's how you know it's your self-care. So if it is not smart, if it's not sustainable, if it's not manageable, if it's not accommodating to you, who you are as a person, if it is not relaxing to you or thrilling to you, it is not your self-care. So if you are reading a list of the 101 things to do for self-care Sunday list, Wellness Wednesday list, 27 things to do for Mother's Day list, and you're looking at those lists and those things aren't making you excited, if you see exercise more, go to the gym 5 days a week, take a walk, and that does not, you look at that and that does anything but make you feel thrilled, it's not your self-care. What are you saying? Don't do those things? No, I'm not saying not to do those things. It's healthcare. Exercise is important for our medical care. It's important for our lives. But when you think about self-care, you want to do the things that are exciting to you because you need them in order to fuel you to continue to be able to do the work that you want to do, to continue to be the person that you want to be, without the feelings of guilt, without the feeling of dread, without the feeling of disappointment and overwhelm. So the self-care tools in your kit really should fit what you need. Some days you need a major activity. You can look at your schedule and go, oh my gosh, I've got this meeting or this is coming up. I'm gonna need like a whole weekend. Some days is just, I just need to sit in my car and I'm just gonna sing my way into work and sing my way home. I'm gonna have my own concert today. And that's it. And brings you back to center. So again, your self-care should be smart. It should be smart for you. So I'm gonna end where we started. You may not control the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. Thank you. Listen, here's all of my details. Feel free to connect with me. You can connect with me on Instagram or LinkedIn or even Facebook. There's a Facebook group that's just getting started for people to be able to go and just have at it at sharing all the things that they're doing for doing for their own self-care. And then join my mailing list. I'm blessed to be able to design a life and live my work because doing what I love to do and how I love to do it is my self-care. It is possible. I was able to do it. You are able to do it too. You deserve your time. You deserve your attention. And you do deserve your self-care. Thank you.
Wow, Desiree, thank you so much for that presentation. I remember the first time that I went through your presentation, it completely changed my perspective of like preventative self-care. And I absolutely take all the information you shared with us into my everyday, and it really has had such an impact on how I live my daily life. So again, thank you so much for that presentation. Again, I highly encourage you all to sign up for her mailing list, follow her on social media, because this is the first time that I have heard of self-care in this perspective. So thank you so much for being here and for your lovely presentation and your ideas and your thoughts.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move forward with today's celebration. And I'm actually going to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Cristina Prado. I'm one of the outreach coordinators here at Fair Housing Foundation. I actually studied human services at California State University of Fullerton. And as a fair housing advocate, I do strive to expand the community's understanding of the importance of fair housing through advocacy and awareness. Now, as you've seen throughout the presentation, each staff member has been sharing a little bit about themselves so that you all can have a better understanding of the people who make the wheels go round here at Fair Housing Foundation. And so my dream travel destination is that I dream to travel to a very specific bay in California where gray whales actually go to birth their babies and they swim up to boats requesting pets. And I think that's the most adorable thing. And I need to be able to have this in my life. Now I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next portion, which is the Youth Poster Contest. So every year we host a youth poster contest where youth in our community are able to submit their artwork with the theme of Fair Housing, My Right. So the reason why we have this poster contest is to engage the youth in understanding the significance of fair housing so that they can take the ideas of equality into adulthood as well. So we invite students from 4th through 8th grade to submit a poster with their annual theme. Now we're going to be taking a look at the top 5 posters that were submitted to us, and we're going to be able to vote on our top poster. So when we go through the next few slides, make sure you keep that in mind. If you need to pull up a pen and paper, feel free to do that now, because we will be giving winner announcements next Monday via social media, and each of the winners will be notified by email and phone call to let them know what they win. Now, what's at stake here? So we actually have 3 different poster contest prizes, where a 3rd place winner will get a $50 gaming gift card to PlayStation, Xbox, Roblox, Nintendo, whatever satisfies their little heart's gaming needs. We also have a 2nd place, which will receive a $75 Amazon gift card, and 1st place will receive a Beats Studio 3 wireless over-ear headphones in the color blue. That's a $350 value, everyone. So keep these prizes in mind when you're choosing your favorite poster. All right, let's see what that artwork looks like. All right, so here is one of our artwork submissions. So cute. So we're going to display the top 5, and then we're going to be going to one slide that has all 5 on one slide, and you'll be able to vote on one of those posters. So this is the 2nd option. And now here we have our 3rd option. So some of these posters were actually submitted through a youth workshop that we hosted in the community. And if you are part of a youth organization, so we'll be hosting that, sorry. So we're going to be going ahead and doing the poll in just a few slides. Oh, and I was talking about the youth posters. So for our youth posters, we were able to host a workshop, and let me tell you, doing artwork is actually really hard. So the artwork that these youth were able to submit, they're actually very impressive. I'll tell you that much, because I tried doing some art and it did not look this good. I'll tell you that. All right, so this is our 5th option, and we have one slide where you're going to see everyone's. Here we go. All right, so let's go ahead and launch that poll. And we have 30 seconds for you all to make your decision on your top 1. So good luck, everyone. Seconds left. All right, and the poll is now closing. All Right. Thank you everyone for participating in that poll. Once again, the winners are going to be announced via social media next Monday. So if you're not already following us on social media, please go give us a follow and see if your favorite poster actually wins one of our top prizes. Now, let me go ahead and introduce Liz Castro, and she'll be taking us into the next portion of today's celebration.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Liz Castro. I am the program manager here and head of our counseling department at Fair Housing Foundation. For almost 14 years, I have been lucky enough to be part of a team that has advocated for equal housing and worked tirelessly with that mission in mind, which is why I'm happy that we're here celebrating today. In the spirit of fun, if I had the opportunity to make it there, my dream destination would be Switzerland in the winter specifically, because I absolutely love the snow. I would definitely make sure to ride the Glacier Express while I was there. But enough about me. Let's move on to more fun things like our raffles. This is just one way that we can show our appreciation to those of you who have joined us in celebrating Fair Housing Month. And like Christina had said earlier, luckily, all of your RSVPs have automatically entered you in a chance to win. But I can't move on further without thanking our sponsors and our donors for these incredible donations. So let's go ahead and see what's up first, and then we'll spin the wheel. So first up, we have one free admission to the Dinner Detective. This lucky winner would be able to enjoy dinner and a show. I've heard it's really amazing. And the second winner would receive a $25 Amazon gift card. So let's spin the wheel and see who the lucky winners are. So first up, again, the Dinner Detective, dinner and a show. We'll go to Melissa P. Congratulations. We hope you enjoy your dinner and show. And of course, second, we have the $25 Amazon gift card. I know everybody has something sitting in their cart. So who's going to order today? Cassandra Monson, congratulations to our winners. We hope you enjoy your prizes. And now I have the pleasure of introducing one of our incredible housing counselors, Sonia Barto.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sonia Barto. Thank you for introducing me. I am a housing counselor. I specialize in landlord-tenant counseling. I was a paralegal for 3 years in the area of public interest law at the legal nonprofit organization. And my dream travel destination is Europe because I want to see all the beautiful sights in the old world. Now, I'd like to introduce another member of our staff, housing counselor Martin Salinas. Oh, sorry, before that, I'd like to go into the next raffle. The next raffle is 2 certificates from Hollywood Wax Museum. And the second prize will be Raising Cane's gift basket donation. And now let's see who the winners are. And the winner for the first prize, the tickets to the Wax Museum, is Kimberly Gonzalez. Congratulations. The second winner, which would be for the Raising Cane's food basket, is Otis Smith. Congratulations. And now I'd like to introduce another member of our staff, housing counselor Martin Salinas.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. As mentioned, I am the other housing counselor here. A little bit about myself is I studied at the University of Cal State LA, where I did community leadership. And I've also worked as a youth leader in helping kids transition back to in-person learning. My dream destination would be the island of Iceland. I think I would like to see the Aurora Borealis, dip in a hot spring, and just enjoy the island to the fullest. And the next prizes that'll be up for our raffle are the donations coming from John's Incredible Pizza, where 2 people will enjoy a buffet and beverages, and an Instant Vortex air fryer. Now for John's Incredible Pizza, our winner is Linda Smith. Congratulations. I hope you enjoy. And for our next prize, the Instant Vortex Air Fryer. Congratulations, Ms. Imabeth Barrera. I hope you enjoy. And next, I would like to introduce our other housing counselor, Ms. Stacy Viramontes.
Hi everyone, I'm Stacy Viramontes. I received my bachelor's degree in political science from the University of California, San Diego. This is my first year as a housing counselor with Fair Housing Foundation. Prior to joining this team, I was an immigration paralegal for 10 years, helping people in removal proceedings before the immigration court. I've always been passionate about fairness and equality for everyone. And my dream travel destination has been the Maldives, so I can enjoy the beach on a beautiful remote island. So on to our next raffle items, which are a 4-pack of day passes to the LA County Fair, as well as a Hush Classic Gray weighted blanket. So our lucky winner for the 4-pack day passes to the LA County Fair is Ms. Laura Frias. Congratulations. Hope you enjoy yourself. And next, the winner of the 12-pound weighted blanket is Ms. Amber Brown. Congratulations to you as well. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our receptionist, Elizabeth Calderon.
Hi everyone, I'm Elizabeth Calderon, the friendly voice you first hear when calling our agency. I have been in customer service over 10 years and always strive to assist every caller in a compassionate manner. For my dream destination, I would love to go sightseeing to Paris, France. Now moving on to our next raffle prizes. We first have the 2 passes for a vineyard hike from Malibu Wine Hike, and also, our second prize is a $25 Amazon gift card. Now let's see who our lucky winners are. So the first winner for the 2 vineyard hike is next up is our $25 Amazon gift card. And our winner is winners. And now back to our executive director, Stella Verdeja.
I wanted to give a good thank you to our sponsors today, Wells Fargo and PennyMac. Their continued support has been valuable to us in continuing our mission in eliminating discrimination in housing. I would also like to thank Michelle Uzeta and Desiree Rew for making the time to join us today. Thank you for all the hard work you do and the excellent talks you provided us today. I think I learned a little bit on the self-care, so I will be moving forward with that as well. In addition, I would like to thank the Fair Housing staff for all of their continued hard work and their dedication to the cause. Without you, none of this is possible. I hope today's celebration inspires and enlightens you. Now is the time to renew our commitment to enhancing community awareness for fair housing rights and emphasizing the importance of ending housing discrimination. If you or someone you know has experienced discrimination, please contact us. We are here to help. And as we end this program, let us take this time to remember the theme of today: fair housing, my right. Thank you from all of us at the Fair Housing Foundation.